What if I told you that human civilization could rise, thrive, build cities, split the atom, reach for the stars, and then completely vanish from the geological record in less time than it takes a mountain to erode? What if I told you this might have already happened? Not once, maybe multiple times, and we'd never know. Close your eyes and try to imagine 4.5 billion years. You can't. Nobody can. Our brains aren't built for that kind of timescale. Human civilization, everything we think of as histories, about 10,000 years old. Writing, agriculture, cities, empires, all of it. 10,000 years. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, showed up around 300,000 years ago. The dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago. Let me put that in perspective. If Earth's entire history was compressed into a single 24-hour day, modern humans would appear in the last 4 seconds. Human civilization. The last fraction of a second. We are spectacularly new. So here's the question that keeps geologists, astronomers, and paleontologists awake at night. In all that time, in all those billions of years, all those millions of species, all those dramatic shifts in climate and geography and evolution, were we really the first? The first to build cities? The first to develop technology? The first to look up at the stars and wonder? Or are we just the first we remember? Let's talk about what we actually know. For most of Earth's history, there was no life at all. The planet was a molten hellscape, then a toxic soup. Then slowly, very slowly, simple bacteria emerged around 3.5 billion years ago. 4 billions of years after that, life stayed simple. Single cells, bacterial mats. Nothing fancy. Complex life animals, plants, fungi didn't show up until about 600 million years ago. The Cambrian explosion, they call it. Suddenly, the fossil record fills with diverse creatures. Eyes, shells, predators and prey. Then came the march of evolution. Fish, amphibians, reptiles, dinosaurs dominated for over 160 million years. Then an asteroid wiped them out. Mammals rose. Primates evolved. Eventually, us. That's the story we're taught. That's what the evidence shows. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The evidence doesn't show everything. The fossil record is incomplete. Wildly incomplete. Most organisms that ever lived left no trace. No bones, no impressions, no chemical signatures. They lived, they died, they decomposed, and the Earth recycled them completely. Fossilization requires specific conditions. You need rapid burial, the right chemistry, geological stability for millions of years. It's rare, incredibly rare. Scientists estimate we've discovered less than 1% of all species that ever existed, maybe far less. So if 99% of species left no evidence, what else might we be missing? In 2018, 2 scientists published a paper that made a lot of people uncomfortable. Gavin Schmidt, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, and Adam Frank, an astrophysicist from the University of Rochester, asked a question that sounds like science fiction, but is actually serious science. Could we detect an industrial civilization in the geological record if it existed millions of years before humans? They called it the Silurian Hypothesis, named after a race of ancient reptiles from the British TV show Doctor Who. Now, before you roll your eyes, understand what they were actually doing. This wasn't about proving ancient aliens or lost Atlantis. This was a thought experiment about biosignatures and how we search for ancient life on other planets. If we can't even tell whether an industrial civilization existed on our own planet millions of years ago, how can we claim to know what to look for on Mars or Venus? So they ran the numbers. And what they found is disturbing. Human civilization has been industrial for about 200 years. We've built millions of structures, paved vast areas. extracted billions of tons of resources, pumped trillions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere. Surely that would leave a permanent mark, right? Not necessarily. Give it a few million years, and almost everything we've made will be gone. Completely gone. Buildings crumble. Roads crack and get buried. Metals oxidize. Plastics break down into microparticles and disperse. Even our greatest structures, the pyramids, the Great Wall, Mount Rushmore, will erode to nothing given enough time. Concrete lasts maybe a few thousand years exposed to the elements. Steel rusts away. Glass melts back into sand. Cities get buried under sediment, crushed by tectonic forces, subducted into the mantle, or eroded by wind and water. In 10 million years, New York City would be unrecognizable. In 50 million years, there might be no physical trace it ever existed. So what would be left? Geochemical signals. Maybe. A thin layer in the geological record showing unusual concentrations of certain elements. Carbon isotope ratios that suggest massive burning of fossil fuels. Plastic particles in sediment layers. Synthetic chemicals that don't occur naturally. But here's the problem. Those signals would be incredibly subtle. A layer, maybe a few centimeters thick, representing thousands of years of industrial activity. Easily missed unless you knew exactly what to look for and exactly where to look. And if you didn't know what it was, you might dismiss it as a natural anomaly. Schmidt and Frank concluded that we honestly don't know if previous industrial civilizations existed because we've never specifically looked for that evidence. We've been studying geology for hundreds of years, but we've been looking for oil, minerals, fossils, not ancient factories. What if they're there and we just don't recognize them? Okay, let's say an ancient civilization did exist. When could it have happened? Not during the age of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs dominated terrestrial ecosystems for 160 million years, but there's no evidence any of them developed human-level intelligence or technology. Not in the early age of mammals either. The first primates were small, simple creatures. But what about before the dinosaurs? The Permian period around 250 million years ago had some interesting candidates. Large reptiles, complex ecosystems, a relatively stable climate for millions of years. Or what about the Carboniferous period, 300 million years ago? Vast forests, high oxygen levels, giant insects, early reptiles evolving rapidly. Could something intelligent have emerged during those periods? Developed agriculture, metallurgy, cities, technology? And if they did, could we tell? The honest answer is, probably not. 50 million years erases almost everything. 200 million years, 300 million. Forget about it. You'd need to get incredibly lucky. Find exactly the right rock formation from exactly the right time period. That happened to preserve exactly the right evidence and recognize it for what it is. We've explored maybe 1% of Earth's geological record in detail, maybe less. There's a lot of rock we've never looked at. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, Atlantis. Everyone's heard of it. Most people think it's pure fiction. A story Plato made up around 360 BCE to make a philosophical point about hubris and corruption. And maybe it was. Plato's account is the only ancient source that describes Atlantis in detail. And he was known for using allegory and fictional dialogues to explore ideas. But here's what's interesting. Plato claimed his story came from Egyptian priests, who told the Athenian statesman Solon about an ancient civilization that existed 9,000 years before their time and was destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe. 9,000 years before Solon would be around 9500 BCE. That's right at the end of the last ice age, when sea levels rose dramatically as glaciers melted, when coastlines around the world were flooded, when any coastal civilization would have been devastated. And we know there were advanced settlements during that period. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey dates to 9600 BCE. Massive stone structures built by supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers who weren't supposed to have that level of organization. We keep finding evidence that challenges the timeline. That suggests people were more advanced earlier than we thought. So was Atlantis real? Was it a specific place? Probably not in the way Plato described it. There's no evidence of a continent-sized civilization with magical crystals and flying machines. But could there have been an advanced coastal culture during the Ice Age that got wiped out when sea levels rose and left only fragmented myths behind? That's not impossible. And if that happened 12,000 years ago, when we definitely existed and were building things, what might have happened 100,000 years ago? 1,000,000 years ago? 10 million years ago? Let's engage in some speculation. Controlled speculation, but speculation nonetheless. If an ancient civilization did exist, what would they have known? How would they have educated their people? We assume ancient knowledge would look like our knowledge. Math, physics, engineering, technology. But what if intelligence can develop along completely different lines? Ancient texts from cultures around the world, Egypt, India, China, Mesoamerica describe knowledge systems that seem alien to us. They talk about sacred geometry, the idea that certain shapes and proportions have inherent power and meaning, that the universe is structured according to mathematical principles that go deeper than mere calculation. The golden ratio appears in ancient architecture everywhere. The Great Pyramid's proportions encode pi and phi, the Parthenon, Angkor Wat, Gothic cathedrals. Even DNA molecules follow the golden ratio. Was this aesthetic preference? Or did ancient people understand something about how geometric proportions interact with natural forces in ways we've forgotten? They talk about energy systems in the body, chakras, meridians, prana, chi. Every ancient culture has some concept of life force energy that flows through living things and can be cultivated, directed, controlled. Modern science dismissed this as superstition for centuries. But now we're discovering bioelectric fields, biophoton emission, quantum processes in biological systems. Maybe they were describing something real, using different language. They talk about consciousness as fundamental. Not an accident of brain chemistry, but a basic feature of reality. Vedic philosophy, Buddhist teaching, Hermetic principles, indigenous wisdom traditions around the world. And they talk about telepathy, direct mind-to-mind communication. We laugh at this. We call it pseudoscience, but we've also documented quantum entanglement. We know particles can be connected across space in ways that defy classical physics. We know consciousness is still deeply mysterious. We know the brain operates using electrical and chemical signals we're only beginning to understand. What if an ancient civilization focused their education not on external technology, but on internal development? Not on building machines, but on expanding consciousness. Not on manipulating matter, but on understanding the deeper patterns of reality. Their ruins wouldn't look like ours. Their artifacts wouldn't look like circuit boards and engines. They might look like temples, stone circles, pyramids aligned to astronomical events, art and symbols encoding information in ways we don't recognize. And we dismiss it as primitive religion because we don't understand the framework. Here's something that bothers me. Cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years tell the same stories. A great flood that destroyed the world. Found in Mesopotamian, Hebrew, Greek, Hindu, Chinese, Native American, and Pacific Islander mythology. Advanced beings who came from the sky or the sea and taught humanity, agriculture, writing, astronomy, and architecture. The Sumerian Apkallu, the Egyptian Thoth, the Mesoamerican Quetzalcoatl, Polynesian Maui. A golden age when humanity lived in harmony, followed by decline and catastrophe. 7. The number 7 appearing everywhere. 7 planets visible to the naked eye. 7 days of the week. 7 musical notes. 7 colors of the rainbow. 7 chakras. 7 heavens. 7 liberal arts. Why coincidence? Psychological archetypes, or fragments of older knowledge encoded in story and symbol. Carl Jung called them archetypes, patterns in the collective unconscious that emerge independently across cultures. But what if the collective unconscious is actually collective memory? What if these stories are echoes of actual events from deep time, distorted by thousands of retellings but preserving some core truth? Subscribe section, Natural Look. I know this sounds crazy. I know it challenges everything we think we know about history and science and reality. But that's exactly why we need to explore it. Not with blind belief, but with open-minded skepticism. Question the narratives. Examine the evidence. Consider possibilities we've been taught to dismiss. If you're ready to go deeper, to challenge conventional thinking, to explore the mysteries that mainstream science won't touch, then subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell, because we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to uncover, and I promise you, it gets stranger. Don't miss what's coming next. So why does any of this matter? Why spend time wondering about hypothetical ancient civilizations that may or may not have existed millions of years ago? Because it changes how we see ourselves. Right now, we think we're the pinnacle, the smartest species that ever lived, the first to truly understand reality, the masters of the planet. We treat Earth like we own it. We extract resources like they're infinite. We pump carbon into the atmosphere like there won't be consequences. We build weapons that could wipe out all complex life. And we do it with arrogance, with certainty that we know what we're doing. But what if we're not the first? What if other intelligent species rose before us, built their civilizations, and fell? What if the geological record holds evidence of previous collapses that we haven't recognized? Suddenly, we're not unique. We're part of a pattern. And if we're part of a pattern, we need to ask ourselves, what happened to them? How did they fall? And are we making the same mistakes? The Silurian Hypothesis isn't just about ancient reptile civilizations. It's about humility. It's about recognizing how little we actually know. It's about understanding that our time on this planet is brief and fragile. So what's the forbidden truth about Earth's lost civilizations? It's not that Atlantis was real, or that ancient people had telepathic powers, or that reptilian overlords ruled the Triassic. The forbidden truth is simpler and more profound. We don't know. We don't know what happened in the vast stretches of deep time. We don't know what's possible. We don't know if we're the first, the only, or just the latest. And the reason this truth is forbidden is because it undermines certainty. It challenges authority. It opens the door to questions that the established narrative can't comfortably answer. Science works through skepticism and inquiry. But institutions, scientific, academic, governmental, tend toward orthodoxy, toward protecting established models, toward dismissing challenges as fringe or pseudoscientific without serious investigation. How many legitimate questions have been ignored because they seemed too weird? How much evidence has been overlooked because it didn't fit the prevailing theory? The continental drift theory was ridiculed for decades before it was accepted. The existence of meteorites was denied by the French Academy of Sciences. The idea that bacteria could cause ulcers was dismissed as absurd until two scientists proved it and won the Nobel Prize. Science eventually but it fights change every step of the way. So when someone asks, could an industrial civilization have existed 50 million years ago? The instinct is to laugh, to dismiss it. But the scientists who actually studied the question said, we don't know. Maybe we've never looked. That's honesty. That's real science. Right now, beneath your feet, there are miles of rock, layers upon layers of Earth's history compressed into stone, fossils of creatures you've never heard of, chemical signatures of climates long vanished, evidence of asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, mass extinctions, and rebirths. And maybe, just maybe, buried somewhere in those layers, there's a thin line of unusual chemistry. a strange concentration of elements, a pattern that doesn't quite make sense. Maybe it's nothing, a natural process we don't fully understand. Or maybe it's a message from beings who lived 100 million years before us, who built their cities, who looked up at the same stars, who wondered if they were alone, who left nothing behind but a whisper in the rocks. We're so focused on looking out into space for signs of intelligent life that we forget to look down, to look back, to consider that this planet has been here for an almost incomprehensible amount of time. Time enough for empires to rise and fall and leave no trace. Time enough for knowledge to be discovered, perfected, and forgotten. Time enough for everything we think is new to be ancient. The Earth keeps secrets, buried in stone, dissolved in the ocean, melted in the mantle, and we've barely begun to listen. So the next time someone tells you they know exactly how history unfolded, remember the Silurian Hypothesis. Remember that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Remember that 4.5 billion years is a very long time. And remember to stay curious. Because the most important discoveries aren't the ones that confirm what we already believe. They're the ones that show us we've been asking the wrong questions all along.